and welcome to the fourth day of understanding your vital nature. So before we start, we'll have a moment's silence and contemplate the session ahead. So a very warm welcome to you all again. And yesterday, Monica gave us a fascinating exposition on enlightening the inner movements. And today she's going to tell us about challenges on the path. What sort of challenges do we face in converting the vital nature? And with this, she's going to draw reference from Letters on Yoga, as I understand. Should be a very intriguing session. So over to you, Monica.
Yeah, thank you, James. James, if I'm not mistaken, is it day 4 or 5? 4, okay. So
yeah,
I thought maybe
yeah, tomorrow is Friday. We finish on Saturday. We always finish our workshops on Saturday.
Great. So today I won't be taking the challenges. So I got confused a bit. Because, although we will, it's an overlap, so it doesn't matter. So today is a transformation of the vital. Of course, it entails the challenges also, So
Okay. Well,
I got a bit confused.
I'm sure we'll overcome this challenge.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Monica.
Thank you, James. Yeah. Thank you for that. So namaste to everyone. Thank you for joining. And let us, I would request one of you to read the prayer. I'll just put it on the screen. It would be nice if one of you can go through it and others can maybe listen. Yeah. Yeah, I hope it's visible enough. Yeah, anyone who would like to read through the prayer?
May I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path, a boat, a raft, a bridge for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for all who are sick, a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles, and for the boundless multitudes of living beings, may I bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the earth and sky, until all beings are freed from sorrow and all are awakened.
Yeah, thank you so much, Swapna. Yeah. So basically today, although I'll be maybe, if time permits, I'll share a bit from something on the slides also. So if I want to transform anything at all, whether it's vital, mental, physical, my life, the first thing that is required is a recognition that it needs transformation, that something is right here in front of me. It is not perfect, but it has the possibility of being perfect. It has the possibility of manifesting the divine presence. So mother says that whenever we talk about education of the mental, vital and other things, we have to take the things from near to far. So being there consciously as this conscious presence, which has the ability to look, has a very discernful eye, what happens is that I am able to look at the near situation. Okay, where am I right now? What am I thinking? What are the patterns that are going on? Oh, again and again I get stuck in these loops of thoughts. So this recognition again and again in the middle of the day, when we take stance as this conscious presence, which has a very discerning eye, it helps us to have a inner check, checking within. Where am I? Where are my feelings? Where is my mind? Where is the body? Body is always somehow in the here and now, but the mind is not in the here and now. Mind is always wandering around in the past, future, or here and there. And most often than not, the mind is at unnecessary places. Mother has also talked about power of thought and imagination, and I'm hoping that we will cover it today, hopefully. But it's the problem is not thoughts. The problem is clinging to obsessive, this addiction with the thoughts that we have. That is our problem. So just like an addict is rehabilitated, if you have seen how an addict gets rehabilitated, if I am drug addict or alcohol abuse, along with leaving the alcohol, I also have to cultivate something beautiful in me. So either I'll be doing some physical sports, maybe some music, some art, maybe some instrument. So that's what we call the rehabilitation process, in addiction. So all of us human beings, we are all addicts. We are addicted to our own patterns. We are addicted to our own way of thought, the patterns of thought. And we don't even know. So the moment it brings me suffering, I get to know that I am addicted, that it is not serving me well. So this is a recognition that is required for the transformation. And then when I recognize, then I try to figure out, okay, what is the way out? So the way we have been discussing and reiterating again and again, that it is not possible for each one of us to be awakened if we do not wake up to our true nature. Consciousness, the conscious presence within. If I do not identify myself as that, there is no scope for either transformation or any kind of perfection. So first I recognize, that's what I was sharing. And then in the rehabilitation process that I'm addicted and now I would like to leave the addiction. I would like to be more in charge of myself, more as a master of myself and my movements. Then we give something higher to us. Imagine that you are addicted to maybe sweets. One is addicted to sweets. Now, if I only tell you, okay, leave the sweets, it's not good for you, you will not be able to do that. It's very rare that one is able to do that. I will be able to leave the sweets only when in its replacement, I get something healthier. So the replacement of my addiction, which is the addiction to thought patterns and beliefs and ideas and this churning, constant churning of the mind, I have to give myself something higher. Parallelly. Just like, again, one example is just if I'm used to oily kind of a food and I want to leave it because it's harming my health. Now, I cannot say that I have to leave the food completely. I have to say that, okay, let me look at some healthier options. And in the beginning, those healthier options will not suit my palate because old habits die hard. I've gotten used to this oily, spicy food. So in the beginning, it will appear bland. That will happen with us. So in the beginning, when I'm again and again coming back, taking stance as conscious presence, it will appear bland. I'll have to put a lot of effort. I will have to want it. I should have suffered enough that I really want this new life now. And then after continuing efforts, persistence of efforts, one day I will get a nice taste of it. What we call the divine nectar. that here it feels nice, it feels good here, and it feels also right. Being there as the conscious present, it feels right, it is non-violent. I do not do any torture on others. I'm sensitive more, and I'm more empathetic, and I know this is the right way. So slowly we get the taste of the new food, which is now healthy for me. It's not as tasty as my taste buds were addicted to earlier, but this also has taste. So I have to develop that taste. So this is the process that we will undergo. So to again and again come back to that conscious presence, knowing myself as that, it requires a lot of persistence, lot of effort. Again and again, we get distracted. Something or the other new theory comes up, I will get distracted. So we have to be very, very vigilant of these distractions. That the only thing that matters is I have to unite with this consciousness. I'm already united, but I have to become conscious of it. So mother in her prayers and meditations, again and again says that, this uniting with thee, plunging into thee. What is that? She plunges into this divine consciousness that all of us are. There, all the resolutions are found, which are not found by thinking excessively about it. So for transformation, again, catching the thread, for transformation, I would need, just a second. So I would need the recognition that something is to be done, right? And there comes the point of aspiration. Now, mother talks about 3 points, which I'm sure most of us are aware: aspire, aspiration, rejection, and surrender. And throughout these 3 days, all that we have been talking about, it exactly is this. So first, now I am aspiring that I want to have a better life. So aspiration is there. I want to leave my addiction. It has made me suffer enough. So I want to leave it. And with the aspiration comes naturally that you are able to put effort. So you are getting up in the morning and taking stance, staying with the breathing, then looking at the river of thoughts and feelings coming and going, knowing yourself as something apart from that, and now looking at that which is looking at the looking itself, and you stabilize yourself there. You know yourself as that awareness, right? So this is how I put effort. And now when I'm putting effort throughout the day, there would be movements. Some of them are to be accepted, some are to be rejected. So if I'm knowingly there as this conscious presence, it is impossible that I am not able to reject the wrong movements. I will be able to reject the wrong movement because now I see it. In Hindi, and also masters and mystics have said, Hans, swan, soul and swan are equated. They are considered, swan is a metaphor for soul. Why? Because soul consciousness, or this divine consciousness, it has the discerning capacity. It can differentiate milk from the water. Such discerning ability it has. It knows the true, it knows the false. So if I take again and again stance as this conscious presence, then rejection comes automatically. Rejection of wrong movements, acceptance of the movements which are in alignment of my truth, with my truth, right? But only when I've swayed from being knowingly there as the conscious presence, only then I will not be able to reject the wrong movements. And then in those moments, we follow it. Then we, in retrospect, realize that maybe I should not have followed it. That's also okay. Happens with most of us. So, and then we correct ourselves next time. So this capacity of looking, the swan soul, which has the capacity of discerning which is true movement, which is false movement, which is coming from the desire soul, which is coming from the true soul. All of us have that capability, right? So with aspiration comes this naturally, the ability to put effort, take more and more stance as conscious presence. And with that comes automatically rejection. Rejection of all the falsehood that is there in my life, all the dishonesties, all the insincerities, all the movements of desires that come up again and again. And why is it important to step away from desire? I hope we'll touch again, that part also. So, and along with that comes surrender. How surrender comes? Because you realize that there is something higher which already knows. The thought cannot know fully, but there is something in me which knows. Something higher is there which has all the power. So I don't have to put myself in pressure again and again to too much, struggle about my life. So again and again comes surrender. And whenever you make a movement which is, that it was a false movement, I should not have done that, you offer it, you again and again. And surrender is a process which is a repeated process, and it cannot happen that I'm totally surrendered now. Total surrender can be there in a moment, but it takes almost, I would say, a lifetimes to be totally surrendered consciously, fully. So never to reach a conclusion that now I am completely surrendered, because next time something may happen, in next moment something may happen, and again I lose my surrender. So one can never be really sure, never be too self-satisfied with oneself. And there is this mention of Nachiketa, as I was sharing yesterday. So Nachiketa goes to Yamraj, the Lord of Death, and he says that he grants him 3 boons, and the 3 boons, the first one is that may my father be okay, and he has mental peace, and he accepts me when I'm back, because he was angry when he left. And the second boon is that the third boon, in fact, I want to come to the third boon, is that he wants to know about what really is the secret of death and the secret of immortality. So Yama in the beginning doesn't want to share this secret with Nachiketa. And he says that ask for wealth, ask for many, many wives, ask for kingdom and wealth, so much this and that. But do not ask for this, because this is a very secret knowledge. But Nachiketa is able to prevent himself from falling from any attraction, whatever the Yamraj gives him. And then finally, the Yamraj says, I will tell you the secret because you have chosen Shreya over Priya. So Priya is something which is pleasant. Wealth is pleasant, wife may be pleasant, so much of luxury may be pleasant. Shreya is something which is beneficial. So running after my desires, it may be pleasurable, although it gives me pain, we know that. But is it beneficial? That is the question we have to ask again and again. So either is it pleasurable or is it beneficial? I want to meet a person I love, it's pleasurable. But sticking too much to a person, is it beneficial? Although it may be pleasurable, but is it beneficial for them, for him and me? So whenever we choose whatever is beneficial, we always are with the psychic presence, because we are able to step back from my needs and wants and desires and clinging. So this stepping back from the desire soul makes you enter into the place of the stance of true consciousness. And this has to be processed and put effort throughout day-to-day activities, since all life is yoga. Each movement I have to be careful. Okay, this may be pleasurable, but is it also beneficial? We really don't, whenever we talk about our loved ones, we think that they should keep thinking about me, they should be missing me. I'm sure all of us would resonate that we want people to miss us. Is it beneficial for that person to suffer while he is missing you? Or would you prefer that he's content as himself, and whenever we meet, that is also okay? So it's good to recognize that we say that we have goodwill for people, but we don't really have so much of goodwill, so we have to turn the ill will to goodwill. So I want the other person to keep on missing me, but I know that this is not really feeling, willing good for him. The good would be, may he or she be contented as he is, and whenever we meet, we have a good time. But that's not what we usually want. We want people to miss us, that people should feel incomplete without me, just like I feel incomplete without other people. So instead of working on my sense of completion, I want to instill lack in other persons also. So it's beautiful to step back from the desires, because we see that they bring us pain also. Pleasure and pain go together. That's why masters have often said, be wary of pleasure. Be wary of pleasure, because it's so attractive, it's so glittery, that it calls us. And when we taste it even once, we all have tasted every kind of pleasure, and pleasure is no problem. Sticking to pleasure is, that I am incomplete without the pleasure. That is the problem. First time we smoke a cigarette, pleasure, but then we become incomplete without the cigarette. So smoking cigarette may not be a real problem. Problem is my addiction, my attachment to the cigarette. No, I think this example of Sri Aurobindo is such a beautiful example, that somebody he used to smoke a cigar, if I'm not wrong, and somebody just mentioned that you smoke this, and the next day he left it. So although he was enjoying it, but his completion, his sense of self was not dependent on smoking a cigar. So can we, again take inspiration from that in ourselves we feel complete and full, yet there is a lot of work to be done in the outer nature. And whenever I am able to know myself as that wholeness and completion, as that conscious presence within, only then I can exert influence on the outer nature, so that it can transform. The transformation of vital, the transformation of emotions, watering only the positive ones, watering love, kindness, understanding, and not watering and nurturing seeds of jealousy, hatred, anger, victimization, that I am the victim, me and my story, look what has happened to me. These are all wrong seeds that we keep on nurturing. Kabir says, boya ped babool ka to aam kahan se khaye. So if I am sowing the seeds of beed, how can I expect that mangoes will grow on a tree? I remember when I had cancer, to 2013-14, when I was diagnosed, I was absolutely unaware of what I was watering. So it brought me actually to the present moment, that, oh my God, it turned the microscope within, that, oh my God, what I have been watering all this while. And the body then gives an indication. The body tells you that something is haywire, you have to look at it. So that way, again, as we were talking yesterday also, that the body is a beautiful servant of the divine. It's a very docile instrument, Mother says. So listen to the body, listening to the movement of body. And whenever we are in the lower vital, full of ambition, greed, lust, desire, this is all lower vital. It's the seat is lower abdomen, below the navel. That's the seat of lower vital. And whenever I am burning with desires, my digestion will go for a toss. I'm sure some of us may have noticed this, that whenever these ambition, greed, pride, lust, all these negativity, whenever is there, it is the here, lower vital, it's a lot of unrest going on. So the body is again telling. And one way, which is a beautiful way, Mother talks about, call peace in that area, call peace in the whole body. And Mother talks about as if that, this solid peace, like a block of ice, it comes and settles in the body. Like a paperweight, there are papers floating and you put paperweight and now it's okay. They're not moving at all. So Mother says, when you call peace in the body, make the body absolutely still. Nothing should move, no thought, no feeling, no movement in the body. Do not give yourself the opportunity to move. That is how you call stillness and peace in the body. Become like a towel on the bed. That's what she says. So if I notice a wrong movement happening, since we are talking about transforming the vital, because I want to do this, I notice it. Old patterns die hard. It is still there. The ripple is still there, but I don't want to follow it. So you call peace. It takes a long time before the ball, which is set rolling for a lifetime, this ball of my likings, preferences, and desire, it takes a long time that it comes to complete rest. So I cannot imagine that after 3 days of meditation or something, listening to Mother and Sri Aurobindo or reading their words, after 3 days or 4 days or even 1 year, I will be rid of desires. No. Let's be, factual about it. Desires will be there. Desires will spring up. Ambitions, jealousy will spring up. But now I am home to notice it. I'm not here and there. I'm here. The priest is there in the temple. Priest is looking for, taking care of the sanctity of the temple. So it doesn't allow everything else to come in and just reside there. So the movements will still be there, but now instead of being puppeted away by the movements and hence suffering, now I will be able to catch them when they arise. And I can have the mastery to choose whether to follow, is it a beneficial one, or whether not to follow. So this is where we come to a step towards self-mastery. We cannot talk of self-mastery if I am not stabilized as the conscious presence. Because I want to be complete. Why is the desires there? Because if I am working from the sense of ego, ego is incomplete. Always ego is incomplete. Ego is a constricted sense of self. And I want to expand, but I'm not able to. So a desire is there. If I get this, I'll become more. So whenever I'm following a desire, I'm actually following the pattern of ego. The moment I step back from a desire, I am telling myself I am okay even if I don't get it. That's a big thing. So if I follow my desires and with a sense of incompletion, that if I don't get this, I'll be unhappy and miserable, then I'm perpetuating the egoistic self, the limited sense of self. I'm actually being my own enemy because ego is not my truth. So I'm being my own enemy. And if I am able to notice it, then it's good to pause. Do not follow that dictate which makes you dependent on other people for your own inner contentment or life situations. This should happen, that should happen, only then I can be contented. Contentment is 24/7 available with us. But we are not available. We are lost in thoughts. There's this movie called Beautiful Mind. I'm sure all of us have seen that movie, or maybe some of us have. In that movie, this mathematician, John Nash, he begins to have these hallucinations. And he's seeing people which are not really real. They're not real people, like all of us cannot see, but only he sees. So in the beginning, he gets too entrapped in their story and their drama and what they want from him. And then he really turns mad. But slowly with his willpower, he's able to persist and he is able to step away from those hallucinations. Now, towards the end of the movie, I think those of us who have read the article, maybe you have read it there. Towards the end of the movie, a professor asks him that, do you still see those people? And he says that, yes, I still see them, but I choose to ignore them. So this is what exactly we have to do, I believe, that I will see the ripples of ego. I will see the ripples of a sense of lack, desires, and if ye nahi mila to mera kuch nahi ho sakta, I'll be incomplete if I'm not able to get this. All these ripples are going to be there, but I have to choose to ignore them and parallelly stabilize myself in the conscious presence. Parallelly. Because if I only try to ignore, and I'm not putting effort in stabilizing myself as consciousness, nothing is going to happen. They will be overpowering. But if I have something more important to do, then they will have no say after some time. Imagine the example I give here is often, you have to, maybe a person insults you on the way you're walking, and if he comes and says something wrong to you, and you begin to react and retaliate. But when the person, again, you're walking and the person comes and insults you. So you are swayed, you are reacting to the person. But imagine that you have to catch a flight. So you're walking You have the flight ticket in hand, all the luggage is there. This person comes and says something to you. Now you don't have time to attend to that person to retaliate and react. Why? Because the flight may be missing. You may miss the flight. So if I give myself something important prior, only then I will be able to really reject all that is unnecessary. So parallel to the rejection, there also has to be a movement of stabilizing, anchoring ourselves as consciousness. Because there our vessels will get full. The lack that we feel, being a sticky ego, we feel a sense of lack. So I want to fill up that vessel. The only way to fill up the vessel is connect. If you want to stick to the ultimate. Stick to the biggest possible, and that is divine. Now, Mother says that never expect anything else from anywhere. You will fall on your nose and you will fall miserably. So if I stick to my knowing myself as this consciousness, and then I will become available not to stick to anything that is there. It does not mean that I will not enjoy. I would actually be able to enjoy even more because I am not sticking. Nothing in the world can make me more complete because I am connected to the completion. So I would stop torturing and abusing other people and situations for my own benefit. Now look at, how people accumulate wealth. It's all a function of ego. More and more and more, and there is no end to greed. And even then I'm empty-handed. So although we want to become more, but the ways we choose are not the right ways. By having more, we don't get. By giving, we feel that something in me has expanded. It's almost the opposite. All the people who have accumulated too much of wealth, ask them, are they happy people? Are they contented people? They will have their miseries. So it's good to accumulate first and know that even accumulation of anything, not even spiritual books and literature, no accumulation can fulfill us. Only letting go of what has to be let go of, all the attachments to our thoughts, ideas, opinions, my ideas, my belief, my story, what people did to me, all this has to be let go of. And the only thing that has not to be let go of is knowing ourselves as consciousness. So we know how to let go, but I think that we'll let go of a wrong stuff. We let go of our knowing as consciousness. We have to let go of all the rest, but we don't have to let go. We have to cling. If we want to cling, if we want to grasp, we cling to this knowing myself as consciousness. And this clinging, many masters have used the word remembrance, sumiran, in Hindi, sumiran. And since we are born in ignorance, we are born in forgetfulness. Mother says when a soul kind of falls into this material consciousness with a bump, it's like amnesia. I forget who I am. So the only way is to remember who I am. So since we are born in ignorance and forgetfulness, it is extremely important. It must become almost important as breathing is so important, that I remember who I truly am. An actor, the example that we have been using, an actor, if he's lost in the drama and a friend comes and he says, oh, but you are the actor, you are not the story. He's suddenly like, oh my God, wow, feels liberating that I am the actor. So when we consciously know, keep on coming back to remembering our true nature, and this has to be done, I think there is no limit to it. We have to continue at it. Then slowly all that is trivial, all that is false, it withers away. It slips. It does not stick. So if we want to stick, we have to stick to the highest. What is my highest that is possible right now? So we stick to that. And then all the little trivial that is sticking, it falls away, it withers away. Yeah, so I'll just take a pause here. I think I have spoken enough. Anyone who wants to share any reflection or anything at this moment?
Monica,
Yeah, yes, okay.
do you know why like many of these like feelings like get get us on our nerves? Why are they connected to the nervous system?
Would you like to share anything that you know about this? Why are they connected to our nervous system?
Well, I don't know anything about it. It's a question.
So I believe what comes to me when you are asking this is it's like a signal, as we have been talking, that body gives us a signal where to be, what is going wrong. It's like a red light, blinking, tuck, 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 tuck. You are swaying away from your true nature, swaying away from your true nature. So I believe, and that's why negative emotions are unpleasant. We don't like it. Anger, we don't like. Nobody likes to be angry. Nobody likes to be jealous, although we happen to be jealous and angry, but nobody likes to be there. So I think there is definitely a connection of how the body is feeling and what kind of emotion is going on. Because the moment I sway away from the true nature, if I lose myself in the role, it gets on my nerves, right? So I think it's beautiful that the body is there 24/7 with us, and that's why masters have said that as long as you have this human body, make use of it. So I believe that it's more like a signal that swaying away from your true center, you get to know that, oh my God, headache happening or something is getting on my nerves. So I've gotten myself again lost in the thought domain, too much in the story. That's what I feel. Yeah. And it's easier to recognize also, subtle movements I cannot recognize. But when it comes to the body, at something bleeding, it brings my attention. I am more aware. So like, for example, with me, little headaches, I ignored because I was living in a deep slumber, right? But when cancer happened, now I cannot ignore cancer. So now I have to attend to cancer. So the body is still with me. The universe is still with me. Instead of feeling victimized that, oh my God, cancer, why did you happen to me? I can say, thank you that you happened to me so that I know that there was fire in my house. Because the mild signals I don't get. The slumber is too deep. The sleep is too deep. So that's what is coming to me. If anyone wants to share, yeah.
Hello. This is Pranav from Ahmedabad. I just wanted to understand, you said lower vital, okay, especially below navel. And then we have upper vital. So what I would like to understand that normally when I read this kind of literatures, we will talk of heart center and head center. Especially, these are two important, energy centers what we believe are there. So some of the philosophies or concepts focus more on heart center, some on the head center. Correct. What is, in your thinking, is the better way to kind of, connect with the inner nature? Because heart is basically state of emotion and the head is state of thoughts. Or we have to look somewhere else. Because most of the time, when I connect the people, they say, when you meditate, your focus should be on your heart center. Because heart is supposed to be closest to the soul. People say soul is physically located closest to the heart. I don't know right or wrong, but then in your thinking, like, which is a better way to get connected with our true consciousness? Is it a heart center or head center? Both are important, but which is better?
So Pranavji, actually both are followable, and Mother and Sri Aurobindo have shared that since we are different human beings, everyone has a different nature, their possibilities of connecting back to the true nature are also different. And Mother and Sri Aurobindo have shared that either the heart center, in the depths of your heart, right, like horizontal depths of your heart towards the back, or focusing on the top of the head, like a bit above the head. Both are okay. And again, depending on your nature, your inclination, whatever suits intuitively, you would know whatever is better to follow. And the other thing is that we have been doing this connection with the breath in the past 3 days. So breath again, even if I'm not focused either on the heart center, I'm not focused on the head center, doesn't matter. If I am able to stay with the breath for a long amount of time, and we see that we again and again get lost in thought. So bringing the puppy back to the thoughts, bringing the puppy back again and again, centering ourselves with the breath. And then the procedure that we did, step 1, step 2, step 3, that is another way. So again, whatever suits whoever, there is no one rigid, I would say, rule about it. Yeah.
But then I would say the males and females, because males are more driven by the head, which is say females more by the heart. I don't know if it is something traditional thought, could be maybe not.
Actually,
true.
no,
It is
I
a
think
traditional thought. Yeah.
yeah, traditional thought, as you said. Yes, exactly. So that's what I was saying, that I have friends who are female and more driven by head still. So I think it doesn't
Maybe rare,
matter.
I think. Only 10% by 5%. I don't know. Because
Yeah,
my experience says, in any situation, the females are more, kind of driven by heart. That way, more creative also. Men are think more. They try to find logic everywhere. But then, this is my own experience. There may be 5% exception, but largely it is something like that. No, right,
yeah,
left side,
yeah.
right side of the brain, people say. So this is what is your kind of experience telling you?
No, I
know
feel that
exceptions are there.
yes, I feel that soul has no gender, and we are that. So to limit myself in either a male figure or a female figure would not be very,
No, but
liberating.
then see, soul is an abstract thing. You have to find an object also
So what kind of object are you looking for?
to concentrate, to focus, to meditate.
Yeah, so focus on breath.
Meditating.
Focus on breath.
You're right. Focus on breath. Look at
Yeah.
the flame. See, we talk of the mother and sheer window. We are looking at some object. See, in a very, very gross level. But then we get inspiration. People say, look at the light. Muslims, say for example, they have nothing. See, go to they have no deity, nothing. They just look at. So this is how the thing goes. Object is probably needed. Especially people, few exceptional people who can manage without any object. So the object always continues to be there.
Yeah, so as I said, Pranavji, let us keep it very simple, because the mind comes in again and again, and now it wants like 10 different things. Okay, give me 10 different things I can focus on, because it is, since it is a monkey mind that we have, most of us, most of the times, it's not in our control. So it keeps on hopping. Now our idea is to keep it trained. So now we have given it one example is breath or top of head or the depth of heart, whatever suits you. And now stick to that. Do not keep on hopping. And even if you have to hop, not you in the sense all of us, even if all of us have to hop between maybe two things, breath, and then you come back to the depth of heart, and you come to breath again. So if we give too many options, then the mind gets confused and no work will be done. So breath is the simplest possible. It is very accessible. We are breathing all the time. Hopefully, all of us are breathing all the time. And that's why it is one very kind of a quick thing to come back to the body. That you focus on your breath throughout 24/7. You make maybe several intervals. After every 3 hours, I will come back to the breath, maybe put an alarm. And that brings you to the moment, which is now. And that also gives you a connection with the body. Usually our mind is not with the body. We are rarely conscious of the breath. So breath, actually, many masters have said that breath is a beautiful connection to come back to the here and now. So let us stick to simple thing. Otherwise, there is no
Thank you.
end to complication. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else? So mother would talk about parallel consciousness. And I'm sure some of us are already aware of parallel consciousness. So a sadhak asked, as Pranabji was sharing, that we need some object to focus on. So that sadhak was focusing on the mother, as Pranavji was sharing. But he said, mother, when I'm playing lawn tennis, I forget all about you. I can't focus on you. So what to do? I want to remember you all at all times. So mother said that in the beginning, what you do is, whenever you get moments where you are not actively engaged, you have pauses in between and, things like you're taking a break, then you remember me. I cannot expect that even while playing lawn tennis, when you need so much of attention, you will be remembering me. So first we begin by focusing on breath or the mother, whoever, whatever suits us, as we were discussing. Whenever we have pauses throughout the day, whenever we have gotten a little break, then slowly we stretch it. Even in the middle of cooking, I become aware of breath. In the middle of session, I become aware of breath. So mother calls this parallel consciousness. Kabir also talks about parallel consciousness, and he gives us imagery of this lady who is dancing, and she is dancing on a rope which is tied to two poles, like a rope walker. And the moment she is walking on that rope and also doing all kind of movements, she has to have a parallel consciousness of the rope. If she is not aware of the rope, she slips and falls down and maybe breaks her leg or dies. So like this, we have to do the sumiran, we have to do the remembrance. Because the moment I slip from knowing myself as the actor, I lose myself into the drama. I suffer. I may be having pleasure, but then after pleasure comes pain. Dual, ek hi thali ke chatte batte, they both come together. So I'm having pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. Now no need to remember myself as conscious presence. It's so much of pleasure. But then the pleasure soon turns into suffering. Now what? What do I hold on to? So it's beautiful example that if we do not have the parallel consciousness on knowing myself as the untarnished actor, the presence of consciousness, then again and again, I will suffer, I will fall down from the rope, and my suffering will wake me up. So good for me, good for me, because all diseases, all accidents, mother says, are there to make you more conscious. So good for me that it told me that my attention was not on the rope. I became too engaged with the drama. So hence suffering is a blessing in disguise, because it brings us back to knowing our true nature. Those of us who can use it as a blessing. So we cannot stress enough the importance of remembrance. It's all about remembrance. We do not have to get something from somewhere. We all have the treasure. We are sitting on the treasure. So it's not about getting, it's about just cleaning the dirt continuously and knowing who I truly am. I am not a beggar. I am full of treasure. Let me be in touch with that treasure. Because what's the fun if I'm not using the treasure? So again and again, having this parallel consciousness. Otherwise, even then we are into win-win situation. It's a safe situation, because even when I fall, I suffer. And then through suffering, I can get back to the rope again. But I may break the leg. So, yeah. And, in Mother's Integral Yoga, in Sri Aurobindo's and Mother's Integral Yoga, Mother says that Nirvana is the first step of Integral Yoga. After that, the journey begins. Nirvana, liberation from the knot of ego. Knowing stably myself as this consciousness. That is the first step. So the journey is not over after this. So I have to parallelly know myself as this conscious presence. And then the journey of self-mastery begins. Then the unification begins. That's the beauty. It's a humongous, long path that we have to travel. But at least we do the first step. We don't even do the first step and we talk about superhumanity. Now, how can I reach superhumanity if I don't even know my psychic being? I don't even know myself as conscious presence. I don't live like that. So how on earth can I talk about superhumanity? We still talk about it because it's nice to talk about it, but still, we have to put the effort. We have to put the effort. And again, we will fall into inertia of old habits, old patterns. To recognize it, to wake up, put the effort. So there is no shortcut around effort and practice. No one has it easy. No one has it easy. Masters, mystics, lay people, whoever have really, stabilized in their true essence, look at the amount of perseverance and dedication and discipline they had. So much of effort. And it's not that we are doing something which requires so much of painful effort. It's joyful. It's joyful to be in touch with our conscious presence. It's very light living. And then coming shortly to the power of breath, the power of thought and imagination. So we have been talking not to get lost in the drama of thoughts. So it may appear that to be dumb and not to have thoughts, but it's not like that. Thoughts and imagination is a power that we have. But at the moment, they are puppeting us around. I don't have the power. They are overpowering me. So when I become again and again, knowingly, I take the stance as consciousness, then now I can use the thoughts and imagination for my service. If I can give rise to a disease, if my thoughts, my emotions can lead to cancer, look at the power it has. So vice versa is also possible, that if I transform my thoughts and feelings, I can also take care of the disease. So power of thought and imagination is not to be suppressed. We don't have to become dumb in the head. It is there for a reason. And the more we connect consciously with the inner intelligence, inner consciousness, the more I am able to use imagination, thought, even feelings, deeper feelings, higher emotions of love, compassion, empathy at my own disposal. I am not being swayed by the lower emotions. They are at my disposal. I am the king now. The consciousness is the king. And rest all are now servants, which are available to work. Once, I think Buddha, Anand, who was the disciple of Buddha, he was talking to the Buddha about company. What do you think? How important is company? 60%, 50%. And the Buddha said, it's all about company. What is the company you have on the path? And most often than not, we have the company of our thoughts. It's a bad company to have. So we have to give ourselves good company. So if we are resting, if we are taking a break, if we are taking a pause in the middle of the day, do not, if possible, do not rest in the rumination of thoughts of past and future and present. If possible, rest in knowingly there as awareness, as consciousness. So that when I wake up from my rest, I'm ready for the next interaction. Again, like we were talking yesterday, like almost taking a holy dip in the Ganges. And with all the energy now that we preserve, we put it into good work. We give ourselves some work. We have been talking, earlier in refinement of senses, artistic faculties. So we give ourselves worthy work, which is suitable to my natural inclination, because each one of us is naturally inclined to some or the other thing. So whatever is naturally suiting according to my swabhava, that's what I give, because the energy needs to be channelized. And this is how we slowly, very gradually, without any force and coercion, we work on, again, just touching the tip of the iceberg here, but I feel that there is so much in the tip that if I put effort, just being there with the tip of the iceberg, which is transformation of the vital, just this much, if I can stay with for some time, it will bring good results. And it's only us that, we are just holding on to our grudges and miseries. No one else is forcing us. It's like there is an example where people somewhere, maybe in some place out of India, I guess, what they do is to, catch the monkeys who are very problematic. They put a round matka like utensil on the tree or somewhere. And in that, there is enough space that you can put in your hand, just enough space. And in that, they put sweets. So the monkeys who are loafering around, they come and they want the sweets. So they put their hand in. But when they are wanting the handful of the sweets out, the hand is like a fist now. So now their hand is stuck. They can't let it go. Now the desire is so strong. The greed is so strong that they're not able to unclench the fist. So they are like this, and they're not able to kind of get out of the trap, and hence the person comes and cages away the monkey. So this is the situation with each one of us. We think that situations and life happenings are making me miserable, but I am clinging to all of that. The moment I let go, I see that there was no one who was really caging me. It was me, myself. So it's very important to recognize that I am stopping my own liberation, and to give ourselves that, grant ourselves that liberation, and parallelly to give ourselves something worthy of doing in life, something which is which occupies my energy, which gives me an aim to live. Mother says an aimless life is a miserable life. Little petty aims, they don't do us good. So we want a bigger, higher aim. Just like, this aim that I want to keep my inner space clean. It looks like a simple aim, but it's not that simple. It's a very big aim. So can I just stick to that? Yeah, anything else anyone wants to share now? I think I've spoken enough.
Is there a difference, Monica, between the conversion of the vital and the transformation of the vital? Because this one seems to be much more emphatic than the other.
Yeah, there may be, but I am not
Conversion,
aware. Yes,
yeah.
yes. And Mother has said that the conversion of vital is a very baffling task. It's not that easy
Yeah.
task. Yeah. So I believe that they are connected, but I may be wrong, actually. So I don't know.
Is the conversion like a psychic movement and this transformation a supramental movement?
I would not be really sure, so I would rather not comment on it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, anyone, any reflections, any questions, or I don't know if you want to add on something to whatever we have shared so far.
Yeah, hi Monica.
Yes, Abhijit.
Yeah, you have very beautifully explained many a things was very worthy and worth keeping, all the time. Just one simple thing, like, it happens that if one is if one concentrates on the breath, maybe on the heart center, and then you have some brilliant ideas, in fact, maybe which has never occurred to you earlier. So is it advisable to keep a piece of paper and a pencil perhaps to note down that? Otherwise, maybe after some time, you may not remember it. Or one may take also another way is like, after the meditation and after the reflection, when one is at work, then naturally whatever is the best ideas, best thing to do, that will again flow to you. It's just like it's sinking, maybe the ideas has to come, otherwise, and the mind is an instrument. So it's striking you when there is a relative calm and poise. But one need not be flattered by that. It will again reappear, maybe when we are actually in the job and doing the writing or whatever. So what do you think? To jot it down right away, or take the risk of forgetting, or maybe come up with a better idea? Something.
Abhijit ji, what you have shared is also there in one of the prayers of the mother. And mother says that when this is happening, then when you are in connection with the conscious presence, you get many insights, and many things float up and come to the surface. And I believe, I think what she shared was that I feel like preserving it. But then I think that if I want to preserve, it's almost like an insult to you, that I don't have faith in you, that you would not happen to me again. And hence I preserve it. And then I let go of this need for preservation. But having said that, since we have a long journey, I believe that personally, it helps to jot down at times. And at times it helps to maybe not jot down. Because I myself have, I continue to, whenever, you sit in meditation or something, insights, intuitions, ideas or whatever, some visual imagery you get, why not to jot it down? So yeah, that's what is coming to me. Okay, so Vignesh ji is asking, how to inspire vital to follow the psychic. Mental understanding is good, but has its limitation. Absolutely with you. There is this Kabir's couplet on this. He says, Pothi pad pad jag mua, pandit bhaya na koe, dhai akhar prem ke padhe so pandit hoye. So he said the real scholar, the real pandit or a master is not the one who has read so much and accumulated so much spiritual knowledge, but the one whose inner heart has opened up, who is opened up to the inner presence. So I believe, Vignesh ji, as we have been discussing, again and again, for example, if I am battered and shattered by my own vital movements, I know that it's not the right way to go ahead in this direction. So by itself, when suffering comes through the vital, when we are following desire, greed, and hence we get a little pleasure and then again suffering continues, something in me questions that how long I want to torture myself. This is not giving me fulfillment. A desire shows that it will fulfill you, but it doesn't fulfill you lastingly. Again, the fulfillment goes away in a few minutes. So if we begin to look at the movements which we have been doing for the past few days, then I become more and more questioning that, is this the right way to go? Is following the desire the right way to go? Is following my ambition and this craving and anger and all that is there, is this the right way to go? Because it has made me suffer enough. And then I see maybe there is something else. And all the masters have hinted at this something else. So I believe that it's good to first of all recognize the suffering that is caused by following the lower vital movements, and recognizing the suffering, you being kind to yourself, you say that I don't want to torture myself anymore. So what is the way out? And then we come to these satsangs or sessions and we try to figure a way out. So getting in touch with our conscious presence is the safest way. It's a very simple way. Mind can ignore it. Believe me. Mind wants sophisticated philosophies. Are ye to kuch bhi nahi hai, this is nothing. Like this, I can reach to my psychic. Yes, you can. But the mind doesn't settle. That's the problem with the monkey mind. It doesn't settle. It wants a higher and a higher philosophy. So if by this simple method, and that simple method can be infinite, everybody has their own simple method. If by following one simple dedicated method, I become knowingly conscious of my own inner truth, a big task is done. A big task is done. The only thing is to persist. If I have a guitar and I begin to play it the first day, doesn't play well, second day doesn't play well, third day doesn't play well, I leave the guitar and I bring a piano, doesn't play well. So how many instruments would I keep on changing? Just because I'm too lazy to put in the effort. So we all have the tools. It's not that we don't have the tool. And how to inspire the vital? Suffer enough. I think that's the best way. That's how most of us, I believe, come to spiritual path, because we have had enough of pain. And we are craving for a relief, because pain doesn't, we don't think that suffering is the way that life can be. We know that life can be better than this. So I believe, and again, there is no right and wrong here. I'm just talking, as I said in the beginning of presentation, the day one, I said, I'm here today because I have suffered enough through my vital movements. And then I got inspired that it's better to follow the psychic, to find the psychic, to know yourself as this conscious presence. So suffer enough, and then you will be inspired. I think that's one way. Again, there can be many, many ways, but that's how I have somehow, dog's tail needs a bit of hammering. So get enough hammers, and then it's a beautiful way to. Mother talks about the blows that we get in life. So mother says that it's not that the divine gives you blows so that you wake up. It's not like that. But the way we follow our lower vital and the outer personality, the way we follow our tendencies and patterns, which are not really beneficial for us, it brings us blows so that we become conscious of the treasure within. We have to become conscious of the treasure within. If not in this lifetime, the next one. If not in the next one. That's the ultimate truth. So mother says, collaborate with the divine. And that means to now say that I had enough of suffering, and I really want to know a better way to live. That's what is divine collaboration about, to be a better and better and better version of ourselves. And there is no limit. That's the beauty. There is no limit. So I would like to talk upon death, reflections on death today, if there is time. If not, we can take it up tomorrow also. But if there are, maybe reflections, most of you have been silent. I hope we are not sleeping because, if too much speech is going on, we can go to sleep. So if you have any reflections, please, I would request if you would like to share.
Yeah, Monica, I would say that the blows in life, one philosophy said it's the past karma, their previous lives. Indians say like this. I have seen very saintly people suffering in this life, but then is one thought process. So how is it true or what is your thinking? Because a lot of people know, in the current life, they were in a very disciplined life, they were very organized, did nothing wrong, still they suffered. And they suffered badly on the physical level. Some part of the life, maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks. So one concept also is because of the past impression. It's not something we did wrong in this. So this is something also matters. I've seen very saintly people. They fall sick in the end of the latter part of the life, in the final in ultimate journey, last 1 year or 18 months or 12 months. They suffer very badly, but then they have led a very, very austere life, still they suffer. So
yes, yeah,
that could be the reason, because it's not that the blows come because you have done something, and my father case, he was a disciple of Sri Aurobindo, he was a good speaker also, Dr. Devendra Srivastava. So he was I have seen him suffering last 10 months very badly. as physical level. But then I could appreciate that he never complained. He said, nothing is there. He used to cry in pain, nothing. So, like this is also, I'm continuing the death process now. So I could see a person disconnecting in the physical and mental. So in last maybe 15 days, he was just breathing, nothing else. So these also, I've got people say like, in the journey, you have some periods which are basically what you did in the past. So
Yeah,
this is what the
absolutely.
reality, because the
Yes.
blows don't come because it's at least Indian thought says it's a multiple birth, unlike European thought.
Yeah. So it's both, Pranavji, it's both, as you are sharing, since we continue lifetimes after lifetimes, and the result of previous is may come in this one, absolutely, and that may come as a blow. And that's why we say often, we find people saying, oh, but that was a very good person, why is he suffering? Just like you were sharing. So absolutely. And the point is that that's the spiritual maturity, as you were sharing, that your father, but he was not complaining. So he was going through whatever is there. I think the way we create suffering is that we resist whatever is happening. We are always trying to resist whatever is happening. So if I have a disease, can I just go through the disease? And that's what, you were talking about, the spiritual maturity. And then we also invite blows, actually, because many a times we have read books, we know that what we should be doing, but still we follow lower impulses. We do that, so we invite blows also. But having said that, it's also true that it's a win-win situation. Each blow makes us a mellower and a softer and a kinder person. So if that is happening, I think blows are really worth it. Yeah. And as Sri Aurobindo mentions even in Savitri, that as if the hammer is chiseling me, it's making a shape, a deity come out of this stone, the rock piece. So it's beautiful if we can continue to what do you say, to go through that hammering, because we know something good is happening. Yeah.
Which is good. It happened the last part of the journey. It is always better. I know one Mr. Devadatta. I don't know whether Mr. James knows him. He was an ashramite for last, I think, 50 years. Recently, he left his body. I saw when I was Pondicherry, I saw him. I could see him, just breathing, nothing else. Doctor said the final time. So maybe I think it's better if you are going to that terminal part of the journey, so that you don't have to kind of this. But one fact remains that blows do come; they will come. Otherwise, you not come, you not be get any birth.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else at this juncture? Anything? So how about inwardly saying to our loved ones, especially those of us who are in intimate relationships, that I love you, but I don't need you to complete me? How does that sound inwardly? How does that feel? I love you, but you don't complete me. I am full and complete in myself. Because most often in our relationships, we are actually doing that, and this is all a play of vital. In relationships, there is so much emotional engagement, so much drainage of energy. So that was just a kind of a thought, that what about saying inwardly to our loved ones that I love you, but still I don't want anything from you. So there is no torture in the name of love that goes on.
Sounds very good, Monica. And I think we should practice it every day, really, because it's such a truth, really. No one can make us whole. The only one that can make us whole is ourselves and the divine.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
I totally go along with that.
Yeah. Buddha said, Appa Deepo Bhav, you are your own light. You become your own light. And I think all of us have that capacity. It's not only Buddha who could do, or the mother, or obviously, Mother and Sri Aurobindo have shown us such a huge way forward by coming to this earthly life. They have shown such a possibility, infinite possibilities. They have given us employment for lifetimes to come. So why do we have so much of extra time then? They have given us so much to do. It's like a vast ocean of work, inner work that we can delve into coming to Mother and Sri Aurobindo. We will never be unemployed. So let us get to work. Let us get to work. I'm sure all of us are already at work, but this inner work, putting effort to, yes, I will be able to realize myself in this life. Everyone is special. Everyone is full of illuminating light. This consciousness, the power, this reminds me of this Upanishad story. Maybe I'll share here. So there this party happening of Devas and Asuras, where they had a clash and the Devas win. And now the Devas are having a party. Maybe some of you are aware of this. So I'm just sharing it in my own version. And they are having this party and they are very excited that we are the one who won and we are the one who had victory over the Asuras. So the divine sees this happening, the Brahma or Vishnu, they see this happening and they say that it's too much of arrogance and pride. We must do something about it. So the divine takes the form of a yaksha, beautiful person, human being, and he says, and he stands outside their door where the party is happening. And he says that I want to be also a part of the party. And the guard there, he says that you are not allowed. It's only for the Devas who have had the victory over the Asuras. So he says, Acha, is it the Devas? They have won. Okay. So please call somebody outside. Let me see what power they have. So he, Indradev, the lord of all the Devas, Indradev, he sends Agni Dev out, the lord of fire. And this Yaksha who is standing outside, he tells to Agni that if you really have power, then you blow this little twig with your fire, you blow it into fire, into flames. And then he says, he laughs at it and he says, little twig, what is the fun, but let me do it. And he does it, he blows out the fire, but nothing happens to the twig. And then slowly other guys come, Agni Dev, Varun Dev, all the Devas come, and all of them blow out their power, but nothing moves, nothing happens to the twig. So that, like this, their arrogance comes to the ground, that, oh my God, we thought that we had the power, but the power is not us, what we think that I have the power. The power is itself responsible for making me see. That is the power we have been talking of, What is making the eyes see? Because if you have a dead body, the eyes cannot see. What is making the ears listen? What is making my intelligence function? What is making my hand move its fingers at its will? So there is something behind all of this consciousness force that we talk about. Without that, there is nothing, there is no power either in fire or, in our own intelligence, in our own accumulations of whatever, awards we have got. It's all a work from behind the veil. From behind the veil. So it's just, the moment we get to know of this, automatically the head goes down to this inner power that we have. Automatically. How can the head not go down? And you realize that there is nothing you can do if the divine consciousness is not there. There is nothing you can do. And that's what we call surrender, to realize that all the power and the force lies in this consciousness, which is making us see, feel, touch, move, do everything. Otherwise, the body has nothing, no existence. So about the death, I wanted to touch upon it because being with cancer has also made me confront death. And of course, Mother says that death and dying is a bad habit, right? So slowly our cells have to awaken to their immortality. But first, before the cells awaken, physical consciousness is the last to change. first I must awaken in my thoughts and feelings to my own conscious presence. Otherwise, how can I invoke and inject faith in the cells that they are immortal? So death for now can happen anytime. In a nick of a moment, gone. Breathing stopped, heart attack, sudden heart attack. That's how we talk about people. But often we talk about people and we think that it is only happening to other people around. It cannot happen to me. But are we sure? And if I'm not sure about my death, can I say I am utilizing my life right? Is it a worthy life? Since I can fall off any movement and go on to the other domains, would I say that this is the worthy use of my life right now, whatever I am engaged in? So like this, for me, it was very helpful, because the moment the older patterns will come and again disturb me, I will ask myself, since being with cancer, I would ask myself, if this is the last day of my life, would I still be thinking this? Would I still be wishing bad for somebody? Would I still be involved in me and my story? No, I won't be there. So come back. Come back to the only thing that matters, the treasure within. And that is itself a guiding light for all the unfolding of life. That itself is the guide. It powers the feelings, it powers the right thinking, it powers the right direction to life. But first, I should be in touch with that. So this, reflecting about death in a positive manner, and the more I connect with myself as that conscious presence, the more I become fearless of death. That I know that the body may fall off, but I am not going to fall off. So what is the worthy way to live? Let me live a worthy life. Let me not just only feed the body and its pleasures and all that. Accumulating and accumulating for the comfort of the body. Am I the body only, or am I something beyond that? Am I feeding that also? So this helped me a lot, and that's why I wanted to share that. Often when poisonous emotions are there and we are lost in that drama again and again, to remind myself that if this is the last moment, would I still be in this poison, or would I be taking the holy dip in the Ganges, as we were talking yesterday? What would I be doing? And better to do that, better to do the beneficial over anything else. And that would continue, that continues. This, whatever realization we get in this life, it continues, carries on to another coming lives. But whatever we gather for the material life, we have to live it. That's the beauty. So if I am making a deep connection with my conscious presence, very subtle, cannot be seen, it will continue. And if I'm just catering to the body and the material needs and the material existence, just to that also is necessary, but just to that, and that too in amount of lust, greed, desire, ambition, nothing is going to stay. All the property, all the jewels, everything will remain. Not even in the grave they will give you. So I think in that way, it's a very positive reflection on death, that it makes me more fearless, and it also makes me focus on the right thing in this life, make a worthy use of this life. So I think that's what I wanted to share basically today. Yeah. And then we'll take up more in tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, challenges on the path. We'll take up everything that comes on the way, which we feel that, yeah, this is okay, but what to do about this? So I would request you in the worksheet also to make a list of all the challenges so far we have faced, or we think that we would face, that yes, I want to do this to my life, want to be a better and better version of myself, but these are the challenges. So we can talk about them. Yeah. So I would put a break to my talking and invite you if you have any. yeah, anything to share? It feels like the words have worked like a silencer today. No one is speaking.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm just immersed into it. So I don't feel like talking.
Yeah, our spouses can be very happy about this situation. Yeah, look, good. You should attend more sessions like that. Yeah, just kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, the point is, Monica, you have very beautifully explained. The thing is like, the other day we were discussing about taking a stand. If you think something is going wrong, maybe in your sphere of influence, so, and you need to take a stand. So there are two ways. One, to escape. And Indians are very adept in that, to close eyes, not to, always to think like, who is going to, bell the cat first, like that kind of an attitude. And that is a very profound weakness compared to Western societies. So what happens is that if you need to take a stand, then of course it will have repercussions. So I've been thinking that I may not be there tomorrow. That's fine. But then still you have to take a stand somewhere. And when you take a stand, there will be repercussions. The psyche could be involved, there will be emotions, there will be so many things. So, I mean, this helps, but in a way, what I mean to say is that one should not try to escape, because the Gita says about that. It's a battle. You cannot escape to the mountaintop just to meditate, contemplate, or to escape from these situations. And
Yeah.
I mean, that is the reality. I mean, and
Abhijit,
there will be all these kind of confrontations, there will be repercussions, and one has to go through it. But at the same time, always, trying to remember and to soften and all that. But then again, that is the reality of life. Otherwise, nothing will progress as such. Individually, one can be very peaceful, but the society and integral talks about total transformation. That will never happen unless people take responsibility and come out and do what he or she is supposed to do. Take a stand. What his inner being says. That is what I.
Yeah, absolutely with you, Abhijit ji. And I feel that often, since the mind is so used to making imagery, the mind makes imaginations. It thinks about how it would be. For example, if you want to learn to swim, and if you are looking at someone who is in the water, you will have imaginations about how that person might be feeling. And on the basis of that imagination, you may decide either to jump into the water or not, right? I feel that we talk about the transformation too soon. Again, coming from my own understanding, not saying that this is the ultimate truth. I feel that before I have even stabilized myself as the psychic presence, I talk about I should take a stand and why not take a stand. I want to say that if the more and more my realization about the psychic is true, it is impossible that I will not be able to take a stand. Because it's not dumb consciousness, it's an intelligent consciousness that I'm connecting with. It tells you what to do. What did Sri Aurobindo do? No, he left the freedom struggle and he went to Pondicherry. That was the guidance he received. So for some people, it may, why are you, going away from the active thing and going into this kind of hibernation? But it was necessary. He knew what all he could do from being in aloneness. So I feel, again, open to, objection. I feel that it's too eager. The mind, the restless energy in us is too eager to jump out. And in that eagerness, I'm not able to take the right stand, the genuine stand, the selfless stand. I most often than not take a stand for my own self-preservation, which is the egoistic preservation. So now, knowing myself as that conscious presence, stabilizing and rooting there, which is a long process, I'm sharing with you, it's a long process. We should not make speculations about it. We should be at the path. And having said that, what happens is, I believe that you are guided. You are guided when to take a stand, when not to take a stand and go into hibernation. So it's not a passive guidance that you get. If the realization is true, if it's only superficial, then again, anything can happen. But we will be guided to take whatever is the right stand, and to be able to even make effort to that, because there is nothing personal that I demand. It's for the welfare of humanity that I'm on this path. Jyoti Priya, if you have heard, Judith Tyberg, mother said that she is already a realized person. She already, her soul is in front. So why is she doing? Because mother said that the more difficulties you get in interacting with all the people, you will know that what all needs to change in you through those people. Yourself, you have no desires and ambitions and whatever. The only thing that she wanted to do was to do what mother's work. And in doing mother's work, the transformation will happen. But first, we cannot miss the first step. So first step requires a lot of persistent effort, which we often forget. Reading so much, we think that, oh, I have also already gotten the touch and psychic. Now that it's time for the other person to do that. While the person who is already in touch with the psychic, he would not even go there. So I believe that, there is a lot of work to be done, and the right guidance comes, and we will be able to take the right stand. We will not be insensitive. Divine consciousness is not insensitive. It's empathetic and sensitive. Welfare of all the people. Yeah. So that's my reflection on it. And if you have, or anyone else have anything else to share, most welcome. Yeah, Sharada ji is asking, is bhakti connected to vital? What is the role of vital in bhakti? Yeah, Sharada ji, actually Alokda has many talks on this also. He shares that there was a time of vital bhakti where you are crying for the divine, and you're wanting to meet the divine as beloved. But this crying and tears and all that is, mother says, and according to Alokda, Alok Pandey, Dr. Alok Pandey also. So this is all part of vital bhakti. But the more and more we come to Mother and Sri Aurobindo, we come to realize that the divine is never away from us, because there is nothing else but the divine. And by that we mean this divine consciousness, which makes us alive. So how am I away from that divine consciousness? I am not away. So that brings us to the psychic bhakti, because mother says that psychic has a very natural bent of devotion towards the divine. So that brings us to the psychic bhakti. But again, I think it would be better to listen to Dr. Alok Pandey's talks on, I think he shares much on vital bhakti and psychic bhakti. Yeah.
How do we get to listen to Dr. Alok Pandey?
So his talks are available on YouTube. If you type Auro Ma, AURO, Auro Ma, MAA.
Okay.
Auro Ma. So you would see many talks. Many talks are available.
Okay.
Yeah. Or even if nowadays with Google, everything is so simple. You type on Google Alok Pandey YouTube, and you would get something or the other. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So whenever we, end the satsang, it's always nice to recollect again, even if we are not chanting it out. Let us dedicate all this virtue to all the infinite number of beings. Let's not keep all this goodness to ourselves. If there is goodness, let us dedicate all the virtue to all the infinite beings on this planet and beyond. So that's something which really inspires me, and hence I was sharing it in the previous sessions also, and hoping that we are ending. Yeah, not that I would like to just plug it, but I believe that there are no further reflections. Yeah. Yes, Sridevi ji.
No, just thank you, Monica. I mean, I think just I'm honoring the thing so that, we were not sleeping. We're really engrossed in your talk. But also realizing that when you ask to share, there is such a lot to share. So this is really maybe not the place, but it's really experience, right? So we feel that maybe we have been there, at least me, as from when a kid to when I was a youth. Then maybe things change after marriage, or, and then you have to come back to believe again that, yeah, the divine which you had when you were a kid is still there, but thank you so much for
Absolutely with you. So we have all tasted that, we've all tasted that, but then we, at times, in life, we get lost in the drama, which absolutely may have its own, purpose also in the lifetime. And then we have to come back to it again, reclaim our throne, reclaim our throne. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So thank you for switching on the video. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Monica. It was
Thank
Yes,
you.
we were really not sleeping. We were so engrossed.
Yeah. Not
you.
able to.
Absolutely engrossed. It was a
Yeah,
wonderful.
thanks, Monica.
Thank you,
Thank you.
James. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
See you all tomorrow.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.